The shredder hummed softly beside my desk. White strips of paper drifted into the collection bin like snow. Across from me stood Sarah, my secretary. The woman I had trusted with my calendar, my contracts, my passwords, and, without realizing it, my entire life. She didn't look nervous. She didn't look guilty. She looked calm, almost relieved. I stared at the shredded remains of a $40 million acquisition contract. The deal that was supposed to secure my company's future. The deal only 3 people knew about. Me, my attorney, and Sarah. Why? I asked. The question barely left my lips. Sarah stopped feeding pages into the machine. Then she slowly lifted her eyes to mine. There was something different in them. Something familiar. For 6 months, Sarah had been perfect. Too perfect. She knew my coffee order before I did. She remembered conversations I had forgotten. I anticipated problems before they appeared. I thought I had found the best assistant money could hire. But I was wrong. Sarah wasn't her real name. She was studying me, learning me, memorizing every weakness, every secret, every mistake. Because Sarah wasn't her real name. Her real name was Elena. The sister I had been told died 22 years ago, and she hadn't come back looking for family. She had come back looking for revenge. Before I tell you how she destroyed everything I built, tell me in the comments, have you ever trusted someone completely, only to discover they knew you better than you knew yourself? Because that's exactly how my nightmare began.
6 months earlier. The first time I met Sarah was on a rainy Tuesday morning. The city outside my office windows looked gray and exhausted. 43 floors below, traffic crawled through wet streets while I reviewed resumes for the 3rd executive assistant position I'd filled that year. Nobody lasted. The hours were brutal. The expectations were worse. Most people either quit or failed. By that point, I had stopped believing the perfect assistant existed. Then Sarah walked into my office. She wore a simple navy blazer. No designer labels. No expensive jewelry. No attempt to impress. Yet somehow she immediately stood out. Not because she demanded attention. Because she didn't. While most candidates spent the interview talking about themselves, Sarah spent most of it asking questions. Detailed questions. Smart questions. Questions nobody else had thought to ask. What's the biggest mistake your previous assistants made? Which parts of your day create the most stress? What task do you secretly wish someone else could handle permanently? I remember leaning back in my chair, studying her. Most people wanted the salary. Sarah wanted the system. And that intrigued me. You're overqualified, I told her. Her resume suggested she could easily manage an entire department. Instead, she smiled. Small. Controlled. I need a chance more than I need a title. Something about the answer stayed with me. At the time, I thought it was honesty. Now I know it was strategy. I hired her that afternoon. 3 weeks later, I couldn't imagine my company without her. Sarah transformed chaos into order. Meetings appeared before I remembered scheduling them. Problems disappeared before reaching my desk. Clients loved her. Employees respected her. Even my board members started calling her directly. That never happened. Not with assistants. Yet somehow Sarah made herself indispensable without ever appearing ambitious. Looking back, that should have terrified me. Instead, it impressed me. One Friday evening, long after most employees had gone home, I stepped out of a conference room after a difficult merger negotiation. My head throbbed. My patience was gone. And all I wanted was caffeine. The moment I reached my office, I froze. A fresh cup of coffee sat on my desk. Exactly how I liked it. No sugar. Extra dark roast. The specific blend from a small cafe across town. Sarah appeared from the reception area. Rough meeting? I laughed. That obvious? You only rub your left temple when you're angry. The comment surprised me. Not because it was wrong. Because it was right. Perfectly right. I hadn't even noticed I did that. Sarah smiled and returned to her work. Meanwhile, I stood there wondering how she had learned something about me that I didn't know myself. Over the following months, Sarah became part of every corner of my life. She organized corporate events, managed investor relationships, handled personal appointments, even helped coordinate care for my aging father. That last part mattered more than I admitted. My father's health had been declining for years. Some days he remembered everything. Other days, he struggled to remember my name. Sarah treated him with extraordinary patience. Whenever she accompanied him to appointments, he seemed calmer afterward. More comfortable. Almost familiar with her. I noticed it several times. But never questioned it. Why would I? At the time, Sarah was the person I trusted most. Then the strange things began. Small things. Easy to dismiss. The kind of details people ignore until it's too late. One morning I arrived at work and found a tiny wooden horse sitting on my desk. Worn edges. Faded paint. One broken wheel. My heart nearly stopped. I knew that toy. Immediately. Because it had belonged to my little sister. Elena. The last birthday gift I remembered giving her before the fire. I picked it up carefully. The wood felt smooth beneath my fingers. Real. Not a copy. Not a replica. The actual toy. Or at least it looked identical. Sarah entered moments later carrying files. Her expression never changed. Everything okay? I quickly set the toy down. Did someone leave this here? She glanced at it. Just once. No idea. Then she continued working. Completely unfazed. I convinced myself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe my father found it. Maybe it came from old family storage. Maybe my mind was connecting unrelated things. Because accepting any other possibility felt impossible. Elena was dead. She had died in a house fire when she was 8 years old. At least. That's what everyone told me. For 22 years. That evening I drove to my father's estate outside the city. The property sat on several acres of land surrounded by old oak trees. Beautiful. Quiet. Lonely. Much like my father himself. When I arrived, he was sitting on the back porch wrapped in a blanket. Watching birds gather near the garden. For a while we talked about ordinary things. Weather. Medicine. The company. Then I showed him the toy horse. His reaction changed instantly. His hands trembled. Just slightly. But enough. Where did you find that? The question came too quickly. Too sharply. I felt my pulse rise. It was on my desk. His eyes stayed fixed on the toy. For several seconds. Long enough to make me uncomfortable. Then he looked away. It's probably nothing. Nothing. The most dangerous word in our family. Because every secret eventually became nothing. Every uncomfortable truth became nothing. Every unanswered question became nothing. When I left that night, rain had started falling again. The windshield wipers moved rhythmically across the glass. The road stretched endlessly ahead. And for reasons I couldn't explain, I couldn't stop thinking about Sarah. Or Elena. Or the way my father's hands had shaken. For the first time in years, old memories started resurfacing. Fragments. Pieces. Half-forgotten images. Smoke. Sirens. Firelight. A little girl crying. Then darkness. The following Monday morning, Sarah was already waiting when I arrived. As usual. Organized. Prepared. Perfect. She handed me my schedule. Then paused. Just briefly. You didn't sleep much this weekend. I looked up. Confused. How do you know? Her eyes moved toward my coffee cup. You ordered 3 espressos before 8 a.m. Then she smiled. The same calm smile she always wore. The smile that made everyone trust her. The smile that, months later, would haunt me. Because I still didn't know who Sarah really was. But somewhere beneath that composed expression, I had the uncomfortable feeling she already knew exactly who I was. And exactly what she had come back for. If you're enjoying the story so far, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It helps the channel more than you know, and it ensures you won't miss the next chapter of Victoria and Sarah's dangerous game. Because what happened next wasn't an accident. It was the first move. The first real crack appeared 3 weeks later. At least. That's when I noticed it. In reality, it had probably started much earlier. The problem with sabotage is that it rarely announces itself. It arrives disguised as coincidence. A missed email. A forgotten meeting. A delayed signature. Small failures that seem harmless on their own. Until they start forming a pattern. The morning began like any other. The city glowed beneath a pale sunrise while I prepared for a video conference with investors from Singapore. A deal worth nearly $80 million. Months of negotiations. Countless hours of preparation. Everything was ready. Or so I thought. At exactly 8:55 a.m., I entered the conference room. Empty. No investors. No board members. No video link. Nothing. Just a dark screen. I checked my phone. Then my calendar. The meeting had disappeared. Completely. Every trace of it. As if it had never existed. My stomach tightened. That wasn't possible. I personally approved the schedule. Sarah entered moments later carrying a tablet. Victoria? I looked at her. The Singapore meeting vanished. Her expression shifted instantly. Concern. Professional concern. Perfect concern. Let me look. She sat beside me. Started typing. Fast. Focused. Within 10 minutes, she found the issue. Apparently, an internal server synchronization error had deleted several calendar events overnight. Convenient. Very convenient. Yet somehow, Sarah managed to recover everything before permanent damage occurred. The investors were contacted. The meeting rescheduled. The crisis solved. Everyone praised her efficiency. Including me. Especially me. Because she had saved me. Again. Or so I believed. That afternoon I bought her lunch. An unusual gesture for me. I wasn't known for personal warmth. Most CEOs aren't. But Sarah had earned my trust. At least that's what I told myself. We sat together in a small rooftop cafe overlooking the financial district. Glass towers reflected sunlight across the skyline. People rushed through crowded sidewalks far below. For the first time, our conversation drifted beyond work. "Do you have family?" I asked. The question seemed harmless. Yet something flickered behind her eyes. "Gone almost immediately." "Not anymore." Simple answer. Short answer. Final answer. I nodded, respecting the boundary. But something about her voice lingered. Not sadness. Not grief. Something closer to disappointment. As if family wasn't something she'd lost. It was something that had failed her. That night I received the first letter. No return address. No sender. Just my name written neatly across the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. One sentence. "Do you remember the fire?" Nothing else. No explanation. No signature. No threat. Just a question. I stared at the words for nearly 10 minutes. Then locked the letter inside my desk. Telling myself it was nonsense. A prank. Corporate harassment. Maybe even one of my competitors. Yet that night, I barely slept. Because I did remember the fire. Or at least fragments of it. Enough to know it wasn't a memory I wanted revisited. 2 days later, another letter arrived. This time containing a photograph. A burned house. Blackened walls. Collapsed roof. The remains of my childhood home. My hands began trembling. I turned the photograph over. 3 words were written on the back. She survived. I felt cold instantly. Not fear. Something stranger. The feeling of standing near a truth you've spent years avoiding. The next morning I drove to my father's estate again. The sky was overcast. Wind rattled tree branches above the driveway. When he opened the door, I handed him the photograph. His face drained of color. That alone told me enough. "You know something." He looked away. Silence. I stepped closer. "Dad." Still silence. The old grandfather clock echoed through the hallway. Tick. 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 Finally he spoke. I told myself it was better this way. My chest tightened. What was better? His eyes glistened. For a moment he looked older than I had ever seen him. Older than illness. Older than age. Older than regret itself. But before he could answer, his nurse entered the room. The moment vanished. His expression closed. The conversation ended. And I left with more questions than answers. Meanwhile, Sarah remained perfect. Flawlessly perfect. Which was becoming its own kind of problem. Because the more chaos appeared around me, the more reliable she became. Another confidential email leaked. Sarah found the source. A major client threatened to leave. Sarah repaired the relationship. An executive unexpectedly resigned. Sarah already had a replacement candidate prepared. Every disaster somehow increased her value. Every problem elevated her position. And somehow, nobody noticed. Not even me. Except one person did. Marcus Reed. My head of corporate security. Marcus had worked for me nearly a decade. Former investigator. Quiet. Observant. The type of man who noticed details everyone else missed. One evening he entered my office after hours. The building was nearly empty. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Marcus closed the door behind him. a gesture he rarely used. Immediately I knew something was wrong. "What's on your mind?" He hesitated, carefully choosing his words. "Your assistant." I looked up. "What about her?" He shifted slightly. "She's difficult to verify." I frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means her history doesn't make sense." The room suddenly felt smaller. Marcus placed a folder on my desk. "I've been conducting standard executive-level background updates." I opened the folder. Employment records. Education history. Addresses. Everything appeared normal. At first. Then I noticed gaps. Large gaps. Entire years missing. Previous employers that no longer existed. References impossible to contact. My heartbeat accelerated. "Are you saying she's lying?" Marcus shook his head. "No." He paused. "I'm saying someone worked very hard to erase where she came from." That night I couldn't stop thinking about the folder. Or the letters. Or the photograph. Everything felt connected. Yet none of it made sense. Until 3 weeks later. The day everything changed. The company hosted its annual charity gala. Hundreds of guests filled the ballroom. Crystal chandeliers illuminated polished marble floors. Soft music drifted through the room. Investors. Politicians. Board members. Media executives. Everyone important was there. Including Sarah. As always. Standing quietly nearby. Managing details. Watching everything. Watching everyone. Near midnight I stepped outside onto a private terrace. Needing air. The city lights stretched endlessly across the horizon. For a few peaceful moments. I was alone. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. One image attached. Nothing else. I opened it. My breath stopped. It showed a young girl wearing a silver locket. A little girl standing beside me. 22 years ago. Elena. My sister. The same locket she wore the day she supposedly died. The same locket I watched emergency workers search for after the fire. The same locket that was never found. I stared at the photograph. Then slowly looked through the ballroom glass doors. Searching the crowd. Searching faces. Searching memories. And that's when I saw it. Not around Elena's neck. Not in the photograph. In real life. Hanging from a delicate silver chain. Around Sarah's neck. Hidden beneath her dress collar. Almost invisible. Almost. But not quite. The exact same locket. The exact same scratch near the clasp. The exact same engraved initials. E.R. Elena Rose. My sister. The room suddenly tilted. My pulse thundered inside my ears. Because for the first time, the impossible no longer felt impossible. And across the ballroom, Sarah slowly raised her eyes. Meeting mine. No smile. No confusion. No surprise. Only recognition. As if she'd been waiting for this moment all along. And in that instant, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't investigating Sarah anymore. Sarah had been leading me here from the very beginning. Every clue. Every letter. Every memory. Every question. She wanted me to discover the truth. The only question left was, why? And what would happen when I finally did? If you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. The next chapter changes everything. Because after that gala, I stopped asking whether Sarah was Elena and started asking what Elena wanted from me. A much more dangerous question. The strange thing about discovering a life-changing truth is that the world doesn't stop moving afterward. The next morning, people still filled elevators. Stock prices still fluctuated. Coffee still tasted the same. And yet, nothing felt normal anymore. Because every time I looked at Sarah, I saw Elena. And every time I looked at Elena, I saw a ghost. I didn't confront her. Not immediately. People think revelations create instant action. They don't. Real revelations create hesitation, fear, doubt. Because once a truth is spoken aloud, it can't be taken back. And I wasn't ready. Not yet. For 3 days, I watched her. Carefully. The way a detective watches a suspect. The way a surgeon studies an X-ray before making the first incision. Sarah continued working exactly as before. Flawless. Efficient. Calm. She scheduled meetings. Prepared reports. Answered calls. Managed crises. Nothing changed. At least on the surface. But now I noticed things I had missed before. The way she occasionally studied old family photographs displayed in my office. The way her eyes lingered on my father's name whenever it appeared in documents. The way she sometimes stared out the window after difficult conversations. Not angry. Not emotional. Thoughtful. Like someone measuring distance. Calculating timing. Waiting. One evening after everyone left the building, I opened Marcus's investigation file again. Then I made a decision. If Sarah wouldn't tell me who she was, I'd find out myself. The first breakthrough came 48 hours later. Marcus called just after midnight. His voice sounded unusually tense. I found something. I was already grabbing my coat before he finished speaking. We met in a small office several blocks from company headquarters. Rain hammered the windows. Computer screens illuminated stacks of paperwork. Marcus looked exhausted, which immediately worried me. He slid a folder across the desk. Sarah Bennett doesn't exist. I stared at him. What? The identity is real. He pointed towards several documents. But only for the past 5 years. I opened the folder. My pulse quickened. There were records. Tax documents. Employment history. Bank accounts. Everything looked legitimate. Everything. Until 5 years ago. Before that. Nothing. No school records. No driver's license. No medical history. No trace. It was as if Sarah Bennett had appeared out of thin air. Fully grown. Fully documented. Fully fabricated. I felt cold. Who helped her? Marcus leaned back. Someone with resources. How much resources? His answer came immediately. Millions. The room fell silent. Because creating a new identity wasn't cheap. Creating one this clean required influence, power, connections. Suddenly another question surfaced. If Elena survived, who had protected her all these years? The answer arrived sooner than expected. 3 days later I visited my father again. This time without warning. No phone call. No notice. No opportunity for preparation. When I arrived, I found him sitting alone in the library. The room smelled of leather-bound books and old wood. Sunlight filtered through tall windows. Dust floated lazily through golden beams. For a moment he looked peaceful. Then he saw my face. And everything changed. I placed the silver locket on the table between us. His hands froze. His breathing stopped. Just for a second. But I saw it. The recognition. The fear. The guilt. Where is she? My voice barely rose above a whisper. His eyes closed. Slowly. Painfully. Like a man preparing to relive a nightmare. Victoria. No. I shook my head. Not this time. I pushed the locket closer. Where is Elena? The silence lasted almost a minute. Then finally. He spoke. And every word changed my life. She lived. The room disappeared around me. Everything became distant. Muted. Unreal. Because part of me had expected this answer. Yet hearing it spoken aloud felt different. Permanent. Terrifying. My father's voice trembled. She survived the fire. I sat perfectly still. Unable to move. Unable to breathe. Unable to process what I'd heard. Then why was I told she died? His eyes filled with tears. Real tears. The kind wealthy men spend entire lifetimes hiding. Because money protects many things. But never regret. We were told it was the best solution. The words sounded rehearsed. Old. Repeated. As though he'd spent 20 years trying to convince himself. Who told you? His answer came quietly. The lawyers. The lawyers. Not doctors. Not investigators. Not police. Lawyers. Immediately my stomach turned. Because lawyers don't solve tragedies. They manage consequences. What consequences? My father looked away. Ashamed. The first genuine shame I'd ever seen on his face. The insurance policy. I felt sick. Physically sick. Because suddenly pieces started connecting. The fire. The money. The inheritance. The company's original funding. Everything. The company. My voice cracked. The company started with that money. He nodded. Slowly. Painfully. I stood so quickly my chair nearly fell backward. No. The word escaped automatically. Instinctively. Because if what I was thinking was true, then everything I built rested on a lie. Not my lie. But still. A lie. My father buried his face in his hands. I never wanted this. The statement sounded pathetic. Weak. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't intimidated by him. I wasn't impressed by him. I wasn't proud of him. I pitied him. Because he had spent 2 decades trapped inside a decision he never had the courage to correct. When I left the estate that afternoon, the world looked different. Not because it had changed. Because I had. For 22 years, I believed I was the survivor. The lucky one. The daughter who escaped tragedy. The daughter who carried the family legacy forward. Now I wasn't sure who I was anymore. That night I sat alone in my penthouse overlooking the city. Thousands of lights glowed beneath the darkness. Cars moved like rivers of gold. People lived their lives. Unaware. Unconcerned. Meanwhile my entire identity was collapsing. Then my phone vibrated. A message. Unknown number. No text. Just a photograph. I opened it. And immediately understood. Sarah had sent it. The image showed 2 young girls sitting beneath a tree. Me. And Elena. Before the fire. Before everything. Before lies. Before money. Before betrayal. Written beneath the photograph were 6 words. Do you finally remember me? For several minutes, I couldn't answer. Because the truth was, I did remember. Not clearly. Not completely. But enough. Enough to recognize the smile. Enough to recognize the eyes. Enough to recognize the little sister who used to follow me everywhere. And suddenly, the revenge story I'd imagined began falling apart. Because revenge requires villains. And the more I learned, the less certain I became about who the villain really was. The next morning, Sarah arrived at work wearing the same calm expression. The same professional clothes. The same controlled posture. But something had changed. Not in her. In me. Because now, I knew. And somehow, she knew that I knew. Neither of us mentioned it. Not once. Yet the silence between us became its own conversation. A dangerous conversation. Filled with unspoken truths. Then the power shift began. Quietly. Strategically. Brilliantly. At first it was subtle. A board member who suddenly stopped returning my calls. An investor who seemed unusually loyal to Sarah. An executive who started consulting her before consulting me. Tiny changes. Almost invisible. Almost. Until one afternoon during a quarterly strategy meeting, I presented a major expansion proposal. A plan I'd spent months developing. Normally the board would support it immediately. Instead, they hesitated. One director spoke first. Sarah had an interesting alternative. I blinked. Confused. Sarah? Then another director nodded. So did I. A third agreed. Her projection seemed stronger. I slowly turned toward the far end of the conference table. Sarah sat quietly reviewing documents. She never interrupted. Never smiled. Never celebrated. She simply waited, knowing exactly what was happening. And in that moment, the final illusion shattered. Sarah hadn't spent 6 months becoming indispensable to me. She had spent 6 months becoming indispensable to everyone. The board. The investors. The executives. The company. While I believed she was supporting my empire, she had been building her own influence inside it. One relationship at a time. One secret at a time. One weakness at a time. For the first time, I understood the scale of her plan. And it terrified me. Because Elena wasn't trying to destroy the company. She was positioning herself to take it. Later that evening, after everyone left, I found a note resting on my desk. No envelope. No signature. Just a single handwritten sentence. The game ends soon. I looked up instantly. But Sarah's office was already empty. Dark. Silent. Gone. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I realized something truly frightening. I wasn't investigating Elena anymore. I was losing to her. And somewhere in the shadows of the company I built, my sister was preparing her final move. The only question was whether she planned to leave me with my freedom. Or take everything. The note sat on my desk for nearly an hour. The game ends soon. 6 simple words. No threat. No explanation. No signature. And somehow, they frightened me more than any accusation ever could. Outside my office window, the city glittered beneath the darkness. Millions of people were going about their lives. Eating dinner. watching television, putting children to bed. Meanwhile, my entire world was balancing on the edge of collapse. I barely slept that night. Every unanswered question replayed in my head. Every letter. Every photograph. Every carefully planted clue. Every moment Elena, had spent earning my trust. Not to destroy me immediately, but to make sure I would understand exactly why she was doing it. That realization hurt more than I expected. Because revenge is easier to survive when it comes from hatred. Much harder when it comes from disappointment. The following morning arrived gray and cold. By 8 o'clock, I was already inside company headquarters. The building felt different. Employees avoided eye contact. Conversation stopped when I approached. Whispers followed me through hallways. Something was happening. And everyone knew it except me. At 9:17 a.m., my assistant from legal called. Her voice sounded nervous. Victoria. What is it? The board scheduled an emergency meeting. I frowned. Without informing me? A long pause. Then quietly. Yes. That was the moment I knew. The final move had begun. The boardroom occupied the top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline. Normally, entering that room gave me confidence. Power. Control. Today, it felt like walking into a courtroom. When the elevator doors opened, I immediately understood how much had changed. Every board member was already seated. Every chair occupied. Every face serious. Waiting. And sitting among them was Sarah. Not beside the wall. Not behind a laptop. Not taking notes. Not acting like an assistant. She sat at the table. As an equal. The sight hit harder than I expected. Because for the first time, she wasn't pretending. I entered slowly, closing the door behind me. The room fell silent. One of the directors cleared his throat. We need to discuss leadership concerns. Leadership concerns. Corporate language for war. I looked directly at Sarah. She calmly returned my gaze. Neither of us spoke. Not yet. The chairman slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents. Financial records. Insurance filings. Legal correspondence dating back more than 20 years. My pulse quickened. Because I recognized several names immediately. The lawyers. The estate managers. The advisors involved after the fire. The chairman looked uncomfortable. These documents were recently submitted to us. Submitted. Not discovered. Submitted. Meaning someone intentionally delivered them. Meaning Elena. One director spoke quietly. The foundation of the company appears connected to insurance proceeds related to the death of Elena Rose Whitmore. The room remained still. Nobody looked surprised. Everyone already knew. I was the last person to arrive at the truth. Even inside my own company. Then Sarah finally stood. Slowly. Calmly. Confidently. For a moment nobody spoke. Not even me. Because after months of secrets. Months of clues. Months of manipulation. The performance was over. She reached into her pocket. Removed the silver locket. And placed it gently on the conference table. I think it's time everyone knows my real name. Silence. Heavy. Absolute. Then she looked directly at me. Not with anger. Not with triumph. Just honesty. My name is Elena Rose Whitmore. The words landed like thunder. Even though I already knew. even though I'd suspected it for weeks. Even though every piece of evidence pointed there. Hearing her say it made it real. Permanent. Undeniable. Nobody moved. Nobody interrupted. Elena continued. I survived the fire. Her voice never shook. Not once. I spent months in hospitals. A pause. Then years in foster care. Another pause. While lawyers, insurers, and family advisors decided it was more convenient if I remained dead. The room collectively inhaled. She wasn't performing. She wasn't exaggerating. She was remembering. And somehow that made every word stronger. Then she looked at me. Directly. Honestly. The hardest part wasn't surviving. Her voice softened. It was discovering nobody came looking. That sentence broke something inside me. Because I had been a teenager. Confused. Traumatized. Dependent on adults. Yet none of those facts erased the pain in her words. She had spent 22 years believing I abandoned her. And perhaps part of her always would. A board member asked quietly. Why now? Elena smiled sadly. Not triumphantly. Sadly. Because I wanted to know if Victoria became the person our family told her to be. She looked around the room. Or the person she actually was. Then her eyes found mine again. I needed to know whether my sister deserved the truth. For the first time since this began. I couldn't find a response. Because every defense sounded hollow. Every explanation sounded weak. Every excuse sounded selfish. The room remained silent. Waiting. Finally I stood. Slowly. Carefully. I didn't know. My voice felt distant. Small. I never knew you were alive. Nobody interrupted. I looked at Elena. Really looked at her. Past the anger. Past the strategy. Past the revenge. And for the first time, I saw my little sister. Not the assistant. Not the enemy. Not the architect of my downfall. My sister. I failed you anyway. The words hurt. But they were true. Because ignorance doesn't erase consequences. Elena's eyes filled slightly. The first visible crack in her composure. Then she asked the question she'd carried for 2 decades. Would you have come for me? The room disappeared. The city disappeared. The company disappeared. Only that question remained. Would I have come? Without hesitation. I answered. Every day. The silence afterward felt endless. Then Elena looked away. Because sometimes the truth arrives too late to heal what was broken. The chairman finally cleared his throat. Bringing everyone back to reality. The legal implications remained significant. Of course they did. This was still a corporation. Still a boardroom. Still a business worth billions. Emotions never erase paperwork. One attorney summarized the situation. Insurance fraud investigations. Estate irregularities. Potential criminal liability for several deceased advisors. Civil litigation. Financial restitution. The consequences would take years to untangle. Then came the final decision. The one Elena had been working toward from the beginning. Everyone looked toward her. Waiting. Because despite everything, she held the power now. She could pursue criminal charges. She could force public exposure. She could destroy my reputation. Take the company. Leave me with nothing. After everything she'd suffered. Nobody would have blamed her. Instead, Elena surprised everyone. including me. She stood, walked toward the windows, looked out across the city, and said quietly, "I'm tired." The room remained silent. Tired of being the dead sister. A pause. Tired of being angry. Another pause. Tired of building my life around something that happened 22 years ago. Then she turned toward me. "I'm not here to take revenge anymore." The statement stunned the room. "I'm here to take back my future. Not revenge. Not destruction. Not punishment. A future." For the first time, I understood. The company had never been the destination. It was merely the road that led her back to the truth. After several hours of negotiations, a resolution emerged. Elena would join the executive leadership team. Her ownership rights would be restored through legal channels. An independent investigation would proceed. Every historical record would be corrected. And me? I voluntarily stepped down as CEO. Not because I was forced. Because it was right. The company had been built on a foundation neither of us created. But both of us inherited. Someone needed to rebuild it honestly. That person wasn't me anymore. 3 months later, I packed the final box from my office. The same office where Sarah first interviewed. The same office where Elena first returned. The same office where everything changed. As I carried the box toward the elevator, I paused. Inside the CEO office, Elena sat behind the desk. Sunlight illuminated the room. The silver locket rested around her neck. For a moment our eyes met. No hatred. No victory. No defeat. Just understanding. The kind that only comes after surviving the same tragedy from different sides. She smiled first. Small. Real. I smiled back. Then I stepped into the elevator. The doors slowly closed. Years earlier, a little girl had walked away from everything alone. Forgotten. Unseen. Declared dead. Today, another woman walked away from everything. But not alone. Not forgotten. And not because someone took her future. Because she finally understood what mattered more than power. The elevator descended. The city waited below. And for the first time in decades, both sisters were finally free. Thank you for joining me through this story. If this journey moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't destroying the people who hurt you. It's refusing to let your pain decide who you become.